People don't realize that OCD can contribute to or coexist with other mental health disorders. It's a huge reason why OCD can be so hard and take so long to diagnose. You can exhibit many symptoms that look like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, which means that the root cause often just gets then overlooked. And instead of recognizing the obsessive thought patterns and compulsive behaviors driving it all, many people, including professionals, may only then treat the surface level symptoms. This can lead to obviously misdiagnosis and just like a silent struggle for years. The disorder that I want to talk about today that has caused me an immense amount of agony due to my OCD is eating disorders. The first time I started exhibiting eating disorder symptoms was 9 years old, which I think is quite young. I would overeat to the point where I would literally be throwing up involuntarily, but this was so consistent to the point where I was having stomach aches all of the time. I had this like overwhelming obsession with like foods and like certain type of foods. And I couldn't just eat like a little bit. I didn't like, moderation was not a thing. And this was starting at 9. The only thing I did know at this time is that food made me feel really safe. It made my brain very quiet. And for a moment, it just kind of felt like I kind of escaped. And I know that kind of might sound dramatic, but it's so true, and it's the only way I can explain it. So obviously OCD is a disorder very rooted in control. So I put that control onto food, and I realized that I could control when I ate, what I ate, how I ate. But it was a very huge, frustrating thing for my parents because I had all of these places where I was like, I'm not eating there, I'm not eating there, I'm not doing that. And, you know, sometimes if we were going there anyway, I just wouldn't eat. I'd just be like, okay, I have food at home. Sometimes we'd go out to lunch. I remember this one time we went out to lunch with like my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, who we never get to see. And we went to this like crepe place or something like that. And I was like, I'm not eating. I have food at home. I want to eat my food at home. I spent hours in the kitchen. And if you know me, I hate cooking, but my OCD was like, I was so obsessed with like exactly what I was putting in my body, and it just gave me such this like relief and element of control that I just was so desperately craving. My first question after breakfast, what are we having for lunch? When are we having lunch? My first question after lunch, when are we having dinner? What are we having for dinner? I would wake up and the first thing I would think about was, when can I eat? What can I eat? It was an incessant loop just about food. And here's the thing, like, I didn't not love that. Like, I loved thinking about food. That was my passion. Like, it was literally like a hobby for me. It was the one thing that I felt like I could control and focus on that didn't scare me and didn't have like all of these awful connotations with it. But as we know, when you love something, OCD attacks it. And already I had an unhealthy dynamic with food, so OCD just started to consume that. I started avoiding certain foods like the plague, meats. I started veering more towards orthorexia when I was in college, where I just would not eat anything that was like deemed unhealthy. I went vegan, I went keto, I went vegetarian, I did a Mediterranean diet, I did a liquid only diet multiple times. So up until I was 18, I struggled very severely with binge eating, and I would be hiding food. If we had a party, there would be people outside and I would be in the kitchen like shoving all of the desserts in my mouth. And then there would reach a point too where I had a compulsion where I would force myself to spit out the food as well. I'm like, okay, you can eat one cupcake and then you have to spit out the other 5, or you can eat a few M&Ms, but after the 5th one, or I just have a random compulsion that was just like, you need to spit this out right now, you know, and I'd have to spit out my food. Or I'd also have that a lot while eating. I would be like taking like 3 bites and then my brain would be like, you're done. You're not allowed to eat anymore. Or if you eat this certain food, your family's gonna die. Or if you eat this, like, you're gonna gain 20 pounds. Or if you eat that, you know, it was a constant loop of things like that contributing to this ongoing cycle, if you will. I was weighing myself every day, but I do want to make it known that I obsessed over my body and I had very massive body dysmorphia. But it really, at the core of it, it was not about weight for me. It was truly about control and that need to escape everything that I felt like was going on in my head. I adored learning about food. I adored learning about fitness. I loved all of that stuff. And it was like a drug to me. Like, I felt like I needed it. And I felt so good when I had a day that was all clean. And then, of course, after a few days, it would just all spiral and I would eat thousands of calories in one sitting. And then the next day I would spend the entire day working out. And then when it got to the point where I started throwing up, this was about the last 3 years, I would eat the thousands of calories, I would exercise, and I would, you know, throw up and all of that stuff. Another thing that was really huge for me is that I would eat the same foods every single day. In fairness, I am somebody who eats similar foods every single day, but it's just because like I genuinely enjoy it and I'm lazy in the kitchen. At this time, it wasn't because I was enjoying it. It was because I felt like if I had this food, I would get food poisoning. If I had this food, something bad would happen to me. So I had my safe foods I would eat every single day, and I felt like if I went off track, then I might as well have just ruined my day and I might as well just binge, kind of thing. When I was about 13, which I talked about in another video, I went really deep into like suicidal ideation, OCD, and I'd be watching hours of videos based on that, and also based on eating disorders and how to basically have an eating disorder. And I would consume so much of that content. And then growing up, I would be watching food videos that were like 10,000 calorie challenges, 20,000 calorie challenges, and like what I eat in a day. I could not get enough of those. I would be ordering laxatives. I ordered like the skinny teas, hunger suppressants. When I got a car, I finally was able to go to the store and get all of those things. I was constantly injured, sick, starving, all for, in my head, all for the greater good. Like, this is so great. Like, your suffering in this way is so much better than you suffering up here, if that makes sense. And to be fair, to me, it didn't feel like suffering because I felt like there was a reward. I felt like I was getting all of these accolades whenever I was losing weight, all of these accolades. Everybody was complimenting me. And then I would have this massive downfall whenever I binged because I felt like unworthy and that nobody cared what I did, because if I started gaining weight, all of the compliments stopped. So I then associated the fact with gaining weight is you are not as important. So whenever I did binge and lose control, that's when it started to become a really nasty cycle. On top of the horrible intrusive thoughts that you get with the binge eating disorder, imagine that on steroids with OCD, not being able to let it go. Finally, I got to the point where I was studying abroad in Ireland and my binge eating was at the highest high. But what was so funny is I was also at my happiest. This habit that had been created for the last 10 years of my life was so incessant, and there was no way I felt like I could get rid of it. So I was getting to the point where I was looking up food support groups, like Food Anonymous, but like for alcoholics, but for food. The reason my eating disorder ended was because of vanity. So I started binging so much that my face started like ballooning up. I had to go to the emergency room because I had such an allergic reaction. This was a few days after. And then I was purging so often that I also started getting blood vessels started popping in my eyes. Trigger warning, I'm gonna put the photo up here. It's like not a very cute photo, but here's another one. But they started popping and I was so happy. Mind you, once again, I was so happy. I loved my life. I loved my friends. I loved the area. But I didn't want to walk into work like this. I didn't want to be struggling with this internally, but I just couldn't stop and I didn't know what to do. So I started reading. I picked up a book called Brain Over Binge by Katherine Hansen, and that really started helping me navigate my binge eating disorder that I had for the last 10 years. It was a blessing in disguise that stuff started happening to me, because then it forced my hand to work on this thing that was so detrimental, not only to my mental health, but my physical well-being. As of this point right now, I'm 6 years eating disorder free. And it's something I never thought I would be able to say. It's something I never thought I'd be able to do. To be there and then now here is just, I don't know, I try to give myself a lot of credit for that, because I know that it's really hard to get from point A to point B when you have an eating disorder and it's so ingrained in your head, especially after 10 years. My eating disorder started as a way for my OCD to gain control. And then towards the end, it was just a habit at that point and a cycle that I needed to break. If this sounds like you or somebody you know, you could have OCD. You could be using food to cope for a bigger problem. If you're wanting to learn more, you can go to NOCD.com and you can also schedule a free call with them today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that this helped, and I hope that you have a great day.